We will move on to the second speaker, Mr. Sudeep Dissanayake. Over to you.
Good morning. I'm Sudeep Sansika, and my research is about identifying gender of inanimate characters in full-length animation movies. And first of all, let's have a look at the jargon. So animations are a method where images are lined up and moved in a sequence. Right now, with the technology and with the competition, we've seen CGI and VFX, but the principle is same. A sequence of images move along, and we see it as a video, as an animation. And inanimate characters are objects. For an example, it can be a chair, it can be a car, anything that is a non-living thing that is given life. For examples, as you can see, like Cars, maybe you're familiar with Cars, Wall-E, Toy Story, movies like that. And anthropomorphizing means giving life to these non-human characters. For an example, giving life to a chair doesn't mean we are moving the chair around. We have to give it personality, we have to give it a mood, a character. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. So the point is, I had few questions when I got to know this field, and the main questions the research is based on: are there any existing methods or frames to determine the gender of these inanimate characters? Because in human characters in animation movies, it's easy to determine or to get to know the gender of these characters. Because getting to know the gender of a character is easier for the viewer to get familiar with the character and to have a better journey through the story. And the next question is, do viewers struggle to identify the gender of inanimate characters in full-length movies? And what elements help viewers to identify the gender of an inanimate character? So, as I said before, it can be easy to identify a gender of an animal or a human, but because of the difference and because we have no idea. For an example, again, if we animated a chair and gave it some personality, it's hard to people to get to know its gender and the role that it's playing in the story. So I had to do my literature review, and I focused on character building and inanimate characters, and about inanimates, and about gender studies, and especially animation as a medium because of the message that it can contain. And the research methodology was very interesting. I conducted a thematic analysis, and I used 2 focus groups to collect and gather data. So when I was having the focus group, I was using social media, and I was using the snowball method and several methods to gather people who are familiar with the movies, because I had a time limitation and I had to select 3 movies, and the movies that I selected was Wall-E by Disney, Cars, and Soul, which is also by Disney. And I had to select some people who are familiar with these 3 movies, and I showed some clips to them to get familiar again, even though they have watched the movies before. And they had their discussions, as it is a thematic analysis. And after going through and coding and having number of conversations and arguments with the groups, I got to know some interesting codes and themes in these things. And I should mention that as this is a very sensitive area, because I'm dealing with gender, the gender was determined by the focus group, and if they were referring to male and female, feminine and masculine, the themes and the codes were taken forward. So the findings were quite interesting and simple. The physical appearance of female characters were known as very thin, slim, V-shaped characters, and the physical appearance of male characters were identified as bold, bulky, and rough. And the employment and the task of the female characters were identified as soft, caring, especially in the movie Cars, if you can remember Sally, the yellow car, who was taking care of the other cars, training them for their future. And the male characters, their tasks were always to win, and their employment was always riskful, and they had a lot of pressure in their work. And the ratio in the movies, which is controversial, there was a lot of male characters in all these movies, and that was a factor to the group to identify the gender. And the power and the role, this has a very thin margin between the employment and the task, but the power they have between their colleagues or in their day-to-day relationships was identified. The emotional and unemotional attachments between things and between their friends or colleagues were identified, and male characters were identified as unemotional, and female characters were identified as emotional characters. Surrounding belongings was a very important thing. For an example, if the character lives in a room, the belongings and the surroundings, the light, the ambience, and the mood in the room was easily picked, because for an example, in Wall-E, the robot, if you remember, we have no idea in the beginning what's the gender of Wall-E, but when we go for his room, we can identify, as he has collected a lot of gadgets and a lot of posters and a lot of tech. The group identify, okay, this is the point where we find the gender of this person, and he's a male. And signs and hints, as in this was a very subtle thing. For an example, little dances and words that they use, and this was very personal, and it was based on the experiences of the users of the group. The voice, the pictures were identified, and the shots of the movies. So this was very interesting, because this had a lot of references. When the characters were introduced, if the characters were introduced in a very slow motion, light up, very romantic way, the group identified the character as a female, and the guys were just coming out and with big lightnings and big lights. So the shots and the perspectives were helping the users, the group, to identify the gender, and the idol, who the character is idolizing, and the origin of the object. So this was also based on their experience, I may say. This was brought up in the Cars movie. So in the Cars movie, the origin of the object. So for an example, we know cars can be grouped as, there are some people who refer their cars as females and males. And then again, according to the brand, if it's a Porsche, if it's a Merc, if it's a BM, then again people divide it. So the origin of the object is very important, and it plays a big role to people to identify the gender. And dependency and independence and passive aggressiveness and some other emerging themes. So these are the things that these are some of my findings, and later on, for the further research, I found that that I was curious later, at what point do the user identify the gender of the character, and how long is the user curious about the user's the character's gender. And it's not mentioned here, but a lot of cultures and a lot of nations have their own gender according to the non-living objects, and I wish I had included those things, but it's an opportunity for further research. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed.